Welcome to Spectrum Spotlight. Today we're going to be talking to people at BinaryStar about their product Nucleus. We have with us Lee Bacall and Harvey Rodstein. Hi guys.
Hello.
How you doing?
So what we want to do here is talk a little bit about what your product is, how it works, all these good things. Let's start with the obvious question. I've been hand coding for all this time. Why would I use a 4GL like yours? What advantage do I get from that?
Wow. Let's talk about a jump into hyperspace. You can get so much more done with a tool that does all the grunt work for you. You don't have to design all this stuff. You can build your model of your data, and from that model, you have the ability to deploy automatically in a green screen environment, what we like to call fast, or a GUI using Accuterm, or create a web product with all the bells and whistles of the very latest technologies, and have the interface easily done because we can automatically kick out JSON or XML to connect to the UI in a browser. So,
okay, but I'm basically speaking as a multi-value guy. Does it mean I need to learn 20 new technologies to use your stuff?
no, sir, not at all. Nucleus bases its operation on the very most basic of basic fundamentals. We use the same files. We incorporate the same access statements.
Well,
So,
let me. Can I interject here just for one moment?
Sure.
It's kind of different levels of knowledge that you need as you move ahead. Nucleus by itself is built for a MV programmer because it helps you manage all your rules to update data and retrieve data in a very, very nice tight package that's duplicatable, easily modified. You're not reinventing the wheel every time you write a new piece of code. That said, the GUI layer over it, which is a kind of an interactive GUI layer, was originally written for Viaduct back in the old days and expanded for Accuterm's GUI. But then again, that's still a kind of a 90s, early 2000s approach. That's what it looks like. That's how it processes. You don't need to know much about that environment at all to make that work. It works pretty cleanly. And again, the same rule set that somebody might be using on a character-based screen, a green screen, will be working on the GUI screen. But now let's talk a bit about the different layers of moving out of the green screen and the interactive teletype type of world. There is a product that we created called StarSite. And what StarSite lets you do is at one level, you can use StarSite to act as a back end to a web server, where everything that comes in can then be forwarded to StarSite to do the processing and return data. Now, on that level, StarSite lets you create HTML templates. Well, how do you create an HTML template? Well, you better know HTML. So yes, when you start moving into web, you better have some chops in HTML and maybe in JavaScript. Once you've done that, that same rule set that was working on a character-based screen and on an interactive GUI screen is now servicing the same rules, the same data, the same rule to update and retrieve data to a web application.
So what you're saying is I can do this in stages. I can actually start by cleaning up the way that I'm handling things on my current green screen, then bring it either into GUI or web without losing all the work I did on that first part.
That's exactly correct. So you're taking the logic that worked in the legacy environment and letting that service the new environments. Now, the step we took beyond StarSite was something called Nucleus, the Nucleus query language. And what I did is I took all the essence of SQL, but I let you do SQL-like requests to a Nucleus rule set. Now, a rule set really is kind of like a pseudo table which has rules about what data gets retrieved and what data gets updated. So that then can be queried from a command line. Nuke will select all fields from this rule set, and then ask for the which field, what you want to see. And basically the same syntax as a SQL. And Nuke will update, does kind of updates like SQL. Because of that, then, I can tell Nuke to work in either XML or JSON, and then write service routines in StarSite that are only there to service data. So a request can come in from the web, give me a listing of this. You call the Nuke command, it passes back to JSON, and that gets forwarded back to the browser. In an environment like that, which is something we're working on quite a bit now, it's more of a three-tier approach because we have a team that is specific to writing things in, let's say, Node.js and using React. And they write the client layer and the middle layer. And then we, on the back end, or the universe programmer or UV programmer, can then write the data service and the data update routines using the same screen routines that were used when Nucleus is being used in a character base. And
so you're saying if I wanted to, I could, for example, split the work and let the web work be done by web guys, but give them the kind of support they're used to from other database environments where they can make their queries and work everything against the back end.
Yes. That's absolutely correct. And that becomes very powerful.
Right, so if I've got a guy who can do end-to-end, I've got those options, but if I don't have that, I can actually split the work.
Exactly. Exactly. That's what it's designed for. So it makes it quite nice that I can model in a character-based environment, which I do all the time. If I've got something that I need to service data or I want to write as part of an app, I'll write a screen in Nucleus that I can test everything character-based. Does it read in the data right? Does it update the data right? Do I have it formatted right? Do I have the validation correct? And then I can reuse that rule on a request from the web. And I'm
so when you
testing
say
it
write a screen, when you say write a screen, does that mean I'm sitting there writing multi-value basic code to create this screen? How do I write a screen in Nucleus?
Well, basically, I create the screen in Nucleus. I write everything under Nucleus. Under Nucleus is written in, and everything that supports Nucleus in the event model is all PIC basic, or UV basic, or whatever you want to call it. And so once that model is working, and you can test it in the character environment, you can then actually have that deployed and have it service data requests from a non-interactive environment.
Right, so, but once again, am I doing this by writing multi-value code? Am I working in a scripting language? How am I actually producing this screen we're talking about?
Well, you're writing the screen with multi-value code. You're using Nucleus.
No, Harvey. Forgetting. We're dealing with the script here, and we're designing a model based upon a simple script which defines the file name and the field names that will be associated with this rule. From that, Nucleus automatically creates the underlying code, and then you can add whatever enhancements you can or would like to add using PIC basic style code to add any kind of a feature that is logical.
Right, so I'm writing in this scripting language, it then converts it into some form of multi-value basic, whatever I'm working with on the back end. And if I modify that multi-value basic, I'm kind of stuck then, aren't I? I can't regenerate everything. I'm going to lose my changes, aren't I?
No, the changes are never lost. All of that is maintained through a strict source code control environment. We have the ability to simply modify an event within the the program that manages the rules. We call those events. So each one of those events, like a pre-field or a post-field, or a read or a post-write or a pre-write event, we're going to have specific code to deal with whatever logical event you want to make happen at that point. So what you're doing is, from that, we're creating a virtual environment for accessing and updating our data.
So it sounds like you're almost talking like object-oriented kind of stuff.
Precisely.
Yeah, it's very close to it. without being it. Kind of like Python. You can write object-oriented code in Python, but not really. Python is not truly an object-oriented language, which you can use certain object-oriented approaches to work with it.
So we're now talking about building code where instead of my being stuck with input as my only real functionality, I've got the ability to step into fields and step out of fields. It's that kind of thing?
Yeah,
correct. You can tab through fields. You can use your mouse to click on the field. You have an intelligent field editor that allows you to move forward or backward within the words within that field. Lots of controls are available to you. You have the ability to put special purpose buttons on the field to do special events.
So I can.
Essentially, I'm sorry, but essentially the rule is kind of what, think of it as an object. And that object is kind of like a little machine. The machine has predefined events that you can then plug your code into. The events include everything that gets the rule set up. You've got a compile time, which says, interpret what they've done and build the routine that's going to be running now, and open the files you need, do whatever you need, do some pre-validation. It's got a load time. Once it's compiled, you actually got a load event. At that point, you can open other files. You've got a huge common block and a global common block. You can put elements in that are now available as you thread back through the event. Anything you've opened in those initial events now is available for the rest of the program. You've got at the end of a program, for example, I can file it, so you got a pre-file to validate that the file is correct. You've got a post file. What happens after you file? What happens when you exit? So you've got those events on the other ends. You've got the events leading into the rule. You've got the events getting out of the rule. Now, once in the rule, you've got standard events like read time. The rule reads data, but then what if I want to do other data? I can hook into that event and open up other files and read other data and fill the fields up on the screen. By name, you never use an input statement. This actually ends up with code that has no input statement because the actual creating an object that is a field takes care of all the input. It's overstrike. It works like any kind of PC or Mac input where you have overstrike, cursor movement, insert, delete, all the things that you would expect in some kind of modern interface. Now, each of those fields has their events. I can set focus to the fields. That's a pre-field. When I leave and lose focus from the event, that's a post field. Within the field, there are many kinds of events that I can hook into. Input conversion, output conversion, correlative that generates the default value. Special, which means I'm on the field and I want to do a contextual jump, a double click or an F12. If I map the keyboard for an F12, jumps into whatever routine I want to jump into and come back out. Now, of course, that's specifically for character base, but it gives you a lot of flexibility because all you do is point to the field object, plug in its events, or plug in special code for the events, and you're done. I mean, something like a simple customer screen that has, like, say, 10 fields in it, name, address, city, date, zip, so on and so forth. You can put something together like that in less than 10 minutes.
Right, but if I've got, like, say, 800 different screens in my system right now, I have to convert 800 screens before I can use Nucleus?
Well, I wouldn't call them screens. You've got 800 different pieces of code. You can call those pieces of code from Nucleus if you want. So many of our larger clients started off with legacy code, and then they picked what functions they needed to start moving toward Nucleus. And as they did that, if those functions had any relation to any other screen, they didn't have to change the other screen. All they did was jump to this. Basically, they can perform or execute anything else from that screen, pull the data back, and so they started making changes to their legacy as they needed it. Now, many of our large clients now run with a combination of Nucleus and legacy. The whole front end is controlled by Nucleus. The menu systems are Nucleus, but there are some old, like bill of materials kind of things and accounting code that's been around since the 70s in some of these clients that they didn't want to touch. So they just used it because it's all pick basic. It all works together. So it's not like all or nothing. It's just that if you want that logic to be available for a non-character-based interface, you've got to do something. You've got to write something from scratch again, or convert it to Nucleus, and use Nucleus to provide the result. Does that make any sense?
So what you're saying is I could have some of my legacy code running, but I could, for example, have one department running on your green screen stuff and another department on your GUI stuff and another department on your web stuff, and it would all work.
Yes.
So I can pick my battles and do this in stages.
That's exactly right.
So
and
let's say I was going to get involved with your product and I was going to start using it. Can you give me an idea of what kind of ramp-up time this is? When you start training people, is this 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks before they can start being productive?
Okay, can I kick in here for a few minutes?
Sure can.
We can get someone started to working with Nucleus in an hour to create a functional screen easily. We can teach an individual to become very knowledgeable in Nucleus in a couple of weeks, so they're really comfortable, and in a couple of months they can be an expert.
And you've been doing this with clients already?
We've been doing this since 1992. Excuse me, 94.
Can you give me an idea of some of the major things you've done to evolve the product? What some of the big changes have happened since 94 to keep bringing it forward?
Well, there's Nucleus. The Nucleus query language was begun. I started writing that in the late 90s. Had something that was functional by the mid 2000s. There was StarSite, which is a template mapper to HTML templates that integrate the rule set to a template. So you don't have to hard code all the input statements in the HTML, so on and so forth. And it also writes support JavaScript for you automatically. And then, of course, as we're moving ahead, was to take the interactive function out of an application where you're working in a full 3-tier environment, where you have user interface people, you have middle-tier people, and you have the data model, which is the data people who provide data to the middle tier and the production. And that's been the big push, because to be competitive in the application world these days, you have to have something that looks like it was created today, not 20 years ago. And trying to make the multi-value model do all of that actually ended up being pretty heavy on the systems we were testing. It was just a lot of overhead, especially when you're trying to have the multi-value system be the main web server and do all the work and do all the formatting and so on and so forth. But as we started moving out of just providing the UI, move that out and providing the pure data and the data modeling and the data update and retrieval, it really streamlined the process of development. And I think we put together a really good team now for that. And it is a lot of people. I think we got one guy on UI. We got one guy in middle layer. We've got Lee and I on the back end. And we've got one guy who was which is something indispensable in today's applications, a design specialist. Someone that could do market research for us and also knows how to design screens so that it looks modern and it looks good and the colors are right and so on and so forth. All the things that most pickies have poo-pooed back in the old days quite a bit, but is quite important when you're showing an app now and you're trying to compete with other applications in the world. I think it's very important to understand that there are data models out there that actually, with the right mind, can do a lot that we're already doing now. We had the advantage 20 years ago. We no longer have the advantage. So now we need to be able to play on the same field. That's my 2 cents.
So I'm hearing the words development, but I spend a lot of my time debugging and fixing. What does Nucleus offer me? Because now I'm no longer just writing every single line of code. How do I actually manage this stuff when a problem comes up? How do I interpret what's going on?
Let me leave with just one word that's really critical to it all: consistency. A consistency of operation, a consistency in how the model dealing with your data works all the time, so that there is an easy way to understand, well, this broke and this is what's happening, oh, that could be found within the pre-field environment because that's what we anticipate happening here. Harv, go ahead and extrapolate on that if you would.
Well, I mean, any kind of bug fixing, it's easy because you just go in and edit your code, and you can put debug points in. I mean, of course, I wouldn't do it for non-interactive, but I test everything interactively, which is kind of nice. So I can put the right debug points in. I can actually run the listeners that service in a foreground, so I can put debug points in. And what's very, very important is that of integrated source code control. Is that any change I make to any code that's under source code control, whether it be a program that stands alone, which we handle, or a Nucleus rule, I can back out. I can actually look at the history of my changes. So I'm never stuck making a change and then trying to remember where the change was or what I made or how to back it out or so on and so forth. Backing out is simply, oh, forget this. It recompiles, and we get going. We also internally divide things up into development type accounts and production accounts. And because of source control, we have a release process. So I can actually go into the development account, duplicate the program, put the debug points in, make sure it works, get it tested. And then once I test it, I can release it, create a build for that environment, and release the build to the production environment. So I never really have to touch a production environment to edit it, which makes things a lot cleaner and a lot more controllable.
So when I'm working with a shop, and I do consulting, so I work with a bunch of different shops, different people have different standards. When I'm doing things like this, am I going to be able to have it slash out in one system and END to end in another system and Q to quit in a third system? Or does Nucleus have its own set of rules for how you start things, move things, and everything else?
The keyboard can be mapped. In fact, one of our clients mapped the keyboard totally different than what we do by default if you're on an interactive environment. So, and you can actually put buttons on your screens. If you're using Accuterm, you can point and click. So a lot of the things that you would say, file is an F11 or file is an F1 or file is a Control XF or whatever you want to do, you can actually create a button that says file. All they got to do is point with the mouse and click. So you're never stuck in one way to do any of these events.
You mentioned clients a lot of times. Do you guys have a range of different industries, or you're pretty much working with just one or two industries?
Well, we had a larger range earlier as the as the client base diminishes. But yeah, we have our major clients all are in completely different industries. Because as is the multi-value environment, it addresses all kinds of data models, doesn't it? All kinds of application requirements. So everything from medical to courier services,
distribution environments, transportation environments, medical.
Yes. We're actually working on an internal project right now, which is taking a lot of our time, where we created an application called QMS, which is called the Questionnaire Management System, something that Lee toyed together in Nucleus at the character level. I took those rule sets, expanded them, and wrote the star site layers on them. And we created a thing called QMS, which allows people to go in and create surveys. But it also allows them to create tests and lessons, and they all work off the web. The nice thing is, one of our larger clients has TSA requirements, and we let them write their tests for TSA, and the TSA saw it, and Homeland Security gave us their nod that, yes, this works great. And so they've got hundreds of third-party vendors worldwide that need to take TSA exams to be able to ship and receive things from the U.S., especially ship to the U.S. And this is... So they based it on our software. We took that idea because it was still kind of looking like an old 80s web app, and we expanded it. That got us into the 3-tier. We designed it. We did some market research, and now we're having all the UI written at the Node.js level using React and Redux. And they're just grabbing the same data rules that are supplying the legacy version of questionnaire management are supplying data to the new system. We didn't have to rewrite anything. We did some tweaks, no rewrite. And we can take that now and provide it in a lot of different ways. So very pleased. The client's very pleased. We're very pleased with what we're seeing in the results of this new product and have a lot of hopes for it. So, and that's what I like. It's like write once, use many.
Sounds very cool. Can you give another example of something interesting you guys have done with the product, even if it was a one-off just for a client?
Oh, one thing we did go ahead, Harv.
Well, a one-off for one of our clients was they needed a dispatch board, and they were looking at doing one. So we put it together using, again, Node.js on an interactive dispatch board. Now, the beauty of using something like Node.js and GraphQL, which is a package that lets you talk to any data service and then map it into JSON arrays, means that and this goes through the whole environment, is that the middle layer and UI layer doesn't have to know the database. All I have to know is what data trees you're giving them and what the update paths are. Done. They don't have to know pick at all. And the beauty of it also is that when there are updates or retrievals, you're not stopping the UI. Many of the legacy UIs, you hit save and you're sitting there waiting for the save, and then the screen refreshes. But everything is dependent in a sequence. And with this way of doing it, people, if anybody's ever used something like Facebook online, you'll know that kind of action where you may say, I want to do a save. The save is going to happen in the background. You might see a little thing pop up in the corner of the screen that it's saving, but it's not stopping you from switching screens and looking around the environment and doing your work. And I find that extremely powerful. So by separating that I/O weight from the user interface that's what we did with the dispatch board. So that as things change, it polls the system and changes things in the board. But meanwhile, while it's changing things to reading and writing, nobody's stuck from or prevented from scrolling or drilling into a line to see the status and stuff like that.
Well, you said drilling in. You mean you can build things like drill downs like we use in a lot of report type tools?
Of course. It's just that, they can build drill downs in the UI environment, and then they just do a request for data. But in many cases, they request most of the data they need on one of the first requests, and then do periodic updates.
So how does this stuff scale? I mean, there are little mom and pop pick systems, but there are also multi-value systems out there that have hundreds or thousands of users. Does Nucleus handle the high end of that? Yes. The thing is, when you're using StarSite has a set of listeners that you can put up. So if I put an array of listeners, let's say I've got a pretty handleable application, and I set up 10 listeners for that app. Those 10 listeners are running as Nucleus processes. I could have 1,000 users hitting that system on 10 users on the UV side, because they're just handling requests. They're not online users. It's a back-end request from their front end. So the idea is we're actually scaling this right now because this product we're hoping will handle hundreds of thousands of users. And so we're actually designing arrays of Node.js servers. We're using Ansible to manage that. And then they will all talk back to a single or a series of universe servers. The nice thing is on a survey, you would have separate clients, so you can have n number of users per client and separate them across multiple machines. One of our largest clients is using this pretty extensively. I mean, using Nucleus pretty extensively with a lot of back-end I/O to other systems. And because of Nucleus, it's easy for me to write like integrations to Salesforce, integrations to Pardot, integrations to Concur, integrations to Twilio. And that makes it easy to grab data from other systems and format it and have it provided for the universe side or the UV side.
and provide data back to them. And because of the n number of listeners, and a listener can do a task, and if I design it right, a task takes less than a second to turn around. So one listener can handle pretty much 10 to 20 online users pretty easily. So, 10 listeners, I've got 200 users or more. 20 listeners, I've got 400 listeners, 400 users. Now, the idea also would be to have networked, and that's our next step, is networked MV systems, where they share data, and so the hits come into, I'm not sure how far along we are with that, but we're moving toward it. So I don't see it. In fact, I think this environment would handle 1,000 users a lot more efficiently than 1,000 users online to one system.
So you mentioned Universe there. Which other flavors are you guys available for? Is this just Universe?
Universe, QM are our major providers right now, but also AP,
D3.
whatever advanced pick is good. D3, yes. So, we kind of like, we have a cross compiler that will handle. If I look back at my cross compiler, I've got Univision, I've got like 5 or 6 other pick flavors that we don't really have anymore because our clients uses them anymore. Our major ones for clients are QM, Universe, and D3.
It's very cool.
But if you needed to support Mentor, we still have Mentor code.
Yeah.
Very cool.
In fact, one of the early versions of this is I wrote I wrote it on NVBase. One of my first implementations of the Star site was for Laguna Chamber of Commerce written on NVBase. And it ran 24 hours and it worked really nicely.
Very, very cool. So if somebody wanted to know more about this stuff, where would they get more information? Are there demos available? All those kind of good questions.
Wait.
Absolutely. You can go to our website, BinaryStar.com, and in the products, go to Nucleus, and we have a contact form. Just click on the contact form and fill it out, and we'll be glad to give you a call and find out whatever you need and address your needs. Arrange demos, product evaluations are available, and we'll be absolutely pleased to do an online demonstration and show any interested parties how the product works.
Very cool. So is there anything we didn't ask you that you wanted to highlight? Any parting words you want to leave for the audience?
I'm covered here. Harvey?
Well, I just want to make sure that they know that BinaryStar is no longer just Lee and myself. It was in the early days, but now it's, I think we've got over 10 people working with us, very specialized. We've actually got 2 PhDs working for us who are doing a lot of the Node.js work. We've got 2 very good resources in South Africa. BinaryStar South Africa is their company. And they both now have over 15 years experience with Nucleus, and they're sometimes the guys there do better than I do. So we've got a really good design team out in California. We're expanding. We're getting some good people working with us who really believe in the product, and very pleased about that.
And just when you're saying that, that's not just internal design. These people are also doing consulting work?
Yes.
Yes.
So it sounds like you guys got a lot going on. Thank you for your time. And we'll post a short version of this in the magazine and the full interview up online. And hopefully people learn a little more about Nucleus. Thank you, guys.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you for your time, Chuck.
Appreciate it, Chuck.
Bye.